Um, Most of the work I'll talk about has been done by Kabir Hussain, who's in the audience, and he has his poster, so that's where you can see a lot more details, as also in our manuscript on the archive. So to give you a sense of what kind of dynamics you can get from stochastic searches with restarts, I thought I'll sort of start with something that's an example that's kind of very familiar to all of us. So imagine you are a random walker starting at a certain point, and there's a fixed target. We know where the target is, but the random walker doesn't. So the only way they can find this target is to just move around. And one can ask, how long before you will hit this target? It's a first passage time kind of problem. And one might be interested in the distribution of these first passage times. So if you do this kind of if you do a simulation and you get trajectories like this, at some points you hit it. And I suppose a lot of people in the audience would know that the distribution of times to hit a fixed target in sort of appropriate units will be a distribution of this sort, which is well known to have a diverging mean, okay? So that's a stochastic search for a target. What happens when you put in restarts? And by restarts, I mean the following. So here I've taken, sorry. Yeah, it is that, no? Because as t goes to infinity, yeah, that dominates. And that's why it diverges. Okay, so this diverges. So now I'll add restarts. And by restarts, what I've done here is the same one-dimensional walk, but every 100 time steps, you jump back to 0, okay? So it's a deterministic sort of restart protocol, and you do the same thing. And again, you sort of ask, when do you hit the target? And you'll get some other kind of distribution, and it turns out, and this is also well known, is that in this case, the mean of this distribution is finite. So this is a well-known result. But in general, the point is that adding restarts of this type can have a profound consequence on the statistics of these kind of stochastic processes. Okay, so what I want to sort of just, we came to this kind of problem because we were thinking about various kinds of biological scenarios where stochastic searches are kind of relevant and where potentially restarts are also the case. But I won't have much to say about this or specific examples. I'm going to give some general results. But I just wanted to mention that these kind of stochastic searches with restarts are very well known and play an important role in various computer science problems. Let me say, for instance, let's take protein folding or something. We don't know if restarts play an important role in that process, but there is known that in certain cases, these protein folding processes are monitored, so to speak, by other proteins like chaperones. And there is some evidence that exists that if the protein folding does not happen fast enough, the chaperone will just sort of unfold the protein and it starts again, which could be interpreted as a kind of restart. There are similar kinds of problems in, foraging for food and so on. People have talked about this to some extent, but it's still at a vague level. So the biology connection is a little bit speculative at this moment, but that's sort of where we started thinking about this. So let me move on to talk about the general class of systems that I'll be interested in, of which that one-dimensional problem was a special case. So we'll think of it as a sort of a three-state system. This is the state in which you're searching, and this is the state in which you found the target, etc. And each state has associated with it a sort of a waiting time distribution. There is a certain probability for jumping from there to there. In the one-dimensional diffusive case, that distribution, if there are no restarts, if this doesn't exist and delays are 0, that would be the distribution I had written out earlier. If you do have restarts, it depends on the kind of restarts. You can have deterministic or stochastic restarts. So this defines a class of systems that I'll be interested in. And I'm not going to put any restrictions on it other than the fact that these distributions are normalizable. Okay. So of course, any trajectory starts at A at time 0, eventually hits this, and again, we're interested in sort of first passage time-like problems. So there are two quantities we're interested in: completion time, which is sort of this time, first time you get to see, and also the number of restarts, the number of times you sort of go around this loop. And what we would really like to do is compute the joint probability distribution. What we can compute is a Laplace transform of that distribution in terms of Laplace transforms of those individual things or certain combinations of those. So I won't go into the details, I'll point you to the poster for details of this, but this is useful because if you do have the Laplace transforms, essentially that means all moments that you're interested in, the problem has reduced to, at worst, quadratures. Many times you can also calculate them exactly, but even if you can't, it reduces to quadratures, so you can actually compute lots of these moments. Okay, so just to mention, there are several results that are previously known which we can rederive. A couple of cute results exist which tell you something about how restarts make these search times finite, or for instance, what stochastic restarts do. But essentially, the point of this slide is to sort of say this is roughly what most work has focused on, is to understand what restarts, what kinds of restarts minimize the time to completion, okay? We'll be interested in a couple of other things. Again, because we started thinking about this from the point of biology, one of the things we were interested in is stochasticity and what is, in general, the effect of stochastic restarts as opposed to deterministic restarts. So let me tell you a few of the results, and then Kabir at some point can take you through more things if you're interested. So one of the things is, if you are forced to work at a certain restart rate, that is at a certain mean restarting time, what happens if you do a deterministic restart process compared to a stochastic restart process? Does stochasticity help ever, or does it always hinder or make the mean completion time less? So what I'm plotting here, to forget the dashed line, I'm plotting this solid line is the difference between the mean completion time for a Poisson restart versus a deterministic restart. And it turns out that there are different regimes. And this is rather general, actually. I've only shown it to you for a Poisson restart, but we have results for a larger class of stochastic restarts, where essentially, at sort of intermediate times, the deterministic restart is better. But there are regimes where adding some stochasticity actually reduces the completion time. However, if you are allowed to choose whatever restart time you want, if you're looking for the optimal mean completion time and what restart time will give you that, then it's known that the deterministic one is the optimal one, okay? Nevertheless, we're still interested in stochasticity because, again, think of these biological sort of scenarios. Even if a deterministic restart is the optimal thing, sometimes that's impossible to implement, and there are certain sources of noise that are unavoidable. And so we wanted to go ahead beyond this and ask what happens with the next level correction. So suppose you're an almost deterministic restart. This is what we call punctual restarts, which is just the next, we just expand around this delta function. What's the next level correction? And perhaps not surprisingly, we find that actually the correction has a very simple scaling with the width of the restart distribution. So for instance, if you had a one parameter family of restart distributions, which as this parameter went from one end to the other started very broad, and at the other end of the parameter scale became a delta function. Suppose the variance of this distribution, this family of distributions, went as a power law of that parameter. In that case, if you use that family of distributions, the mean completion time would also scale as a power law with that parameter. If instead you had a one parameter family whose variance went as an exponential with that parameter, the correction would go as an exponential with that parameter. So it scales rather simply, and we can sort of we've tried out lots of different distributions, lots of different restart distributions, and you always find this scaling. But also interestingly, by actually being able to compute this coefficient, we find by having an expression like this, we can put some very simple bounds on what is the optimal restart time. So what are the restart times that you need to be trying in order to actually minimize this quantity? And this is one very simple bound. We can actually make this bound tighter, but this is a bound which says the optimal restart time should be larger than a certain time that you can compute directly from the search time, from the search distribution, nothing else. Okay, it's just the mode of the search distribution. So, we can get a few simple bounds. This is the simplest we have, but we can make this tighter. I just wanted to illustrate the kinds of results you can get. Okay, in the couple of minutes I have left, I'll stress one more thing, which is, so this was about sort of what happens if you add stochasticity to the restart distribution. You could also use this whole formalism to ask, what if you're not interested only in minimizing the time to find the target, but you're also worried about these restarts, and maybe, again, thinking in a biological context. Many times these restart processes might very well have energetic costs or other kinds of costs. And what you might be interested in is not just minimizing the mean completion time, but some combination of reducing the resets and reducing the mean completion time. So in our formalism, we can do this somewhat easily, again, because moments of the restart number, as well as cross moments, are easy to compute. In some cases, even analytically. But the point is, again, you can find sort of, if this is the function you want to optimize, you can sort of find optima and so on. But let me end by just saying, I'll extend this figure. I showed you this figure up to this point, and I ignored that dash line. I bring back the dash line and extend it now. The dash line shows what happens to the number of restarts as you go from as you add stochasticity. And again, we can go back to the same question I asked for the mean completion time. What does stochasticity do if you are restricted to be working at a particular restart time? And it turns out that there are, again, different regimes, and there are regimes where a stochastic restart is both faster in the sense that it reduces the mean completion time, and it's also more efficient in the sense that it reduces the number of restarts that you need. So again, I've only shown this for a Poisson case, but we have results for a larger class of stochastic restarts. And I'll end there and maybe just leave you with pointing again to Kabir's poster, and this is how to find it. So this is one suggestion for how to find it. Thank you, I'll take a question.
We have time for questions.
What about restart positions? I mean, like,
yes. So,
I mean, instead of choosing restart time, you can randomly choose restart position. Number one, that is. The second thing is, if really restart, like stochastic restart time is so efficient, so there should be some entropy associated with that, which could be maximized, show that it is maximum, something like that. I don't know, I'm just.
Yeah, no. So your first point is absolutely valid. In a sense, that general framework I showed doesn't include all the problems, the possible problems with, or the class of systems you could be interested in with restarts. You could have restarts that depend on how close you are to the target, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things, I think we can try and extend some of these. We only looked at the time, the ones where it was just a time and each restart was independent of the previous restart and so forth. But I think there are certainly systems which would be of the type you're saying. I mean, think about how to extend this. As for your second point, yeah, well, again, I don't have an immediate answer, but sure. I should point out though that, I must emphasize that these different regimes are situations where we are forcing the restart rate to be a certain value and then asking what would happen if you were at 0.5 and you could make it Poisson or make it something else and so on. If you have freedom to go anywhere in this space, it seems that the deterministic ones are always the ones that are better. So if you're really out to minimize completion time, then the best thing to do is a deterministic restart. Yeah. No, sure. I understand.
Any other questions?
That was a good point. But I mean, yeah, I've kind of assumed in previous and next that you have a way of deciding previous and next. You can pick your own.
You had something about Levy, right? Was that Levy walk or is Levy flights?
Oh,
with some result on somewhere.
Yeah,
maybe
later.
Maybe this one.
Yeah.
No, this. Sorry, I should have been more precise. I meant a distribution like this.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
It's just the same. It's not. So here I've just used that e to the minus 1 over t. Sriram, are you happy with that?
Okay. That's been clarified. Let's thank the speaker.